Hi and welcome to this second video looking at chord tracks. So here we're going to look at different use of chord tracks and how it can help your ability to create music, particularly in a kind of in a live situation, although obviously you'd probably be doing it in a studio, but I mean improvising, etc. So this is going to take the ability of chord tracks to transform what you play live, so in the moment, and use that to improve your chances of getting things right, I guess you would say. So what we've got here is a chord progression setup. So I'm just going to play you through this. So this is, you'll probably recognize it as Fly Me to the Moon. So obviously that would cycle around again and again, etc., going back to the A minor. So the chords which are in here have then been taken and put into a chord track in the way we've seen previously, so just highlighting one at a time and then moving into the chord track. And that's what we've ended up. Now, what we're going to look at is how we can get your tracks to follow what's been put into the chord track and modify what you're playing at the time. So this is done in the chords section of the inspector, so you'll see that will light up if it's activated, and we've got three options. So normally it would be off, and first thing we're going to look at is chords. The eagle-eyed amongst you will have spotted the fact we're using Cubase 8.5 for reasons that will become clear later on, but mostly because at the time of me doing this video the scales option doesn't work in Cubase 9, or certainly doesn't seem to, whereas it does work in Cubase 8.5. So we're going to look at it there and hopefully it'll be fixed fairly quickly. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on the on-screen keyboard so you can see that I'm just going to play this C major chord all the way through just by pressing Q, E and T on the keyboard. And what Cubase is going to do is take that and then use the chord track to change what I'm doing and make it fit with the chords. So when I record it, we're going to hear that go. So I'll just do it quickly with no counting to save wasting time. So here we go. So we get the idea there, and you can see straight away it's done that pretty successfully. Generally we're not getting the C major chord, get one at the end, and I'm not sure anyway, yeah, and one here as well, but most of the time it's actually changing what we're doing and making it fit with the chord progression we've put in. Now clearly I was just doing that as a simple example on there. Now if you were to do it with an interesting rhythm, etc., it would be much more interesting what's there, but the idea is to demonstrate what it can do for you. Now, that's chords mode, which works in both versions. The other one is scales mode. So we're going to look at the scales, but scales doesn't appear to be working in Cubase 9, which is why I'm in 8.5. But if I get an update on that, I will put that in the description, etc. So we're just going to look at scales in the chord track. So if we click on the chord track, there's a couple of things we need to do. You probably need to turn off automatic scales. So it may be on automatic scales, it may not. But if you turn that off and then click here to do show scales, it will show you the scales that Cubase has decided, with a bit of analysis, will fit with the chords. And it does a reasonably good job. Better than some people may do. So it tries to use, music theory to work out which scales are going to work well over the chords, etc., and fit them together, which is what you would do as an improviser. And then it allows you to now play scale passages, because when you were doing chords, a lot of the notes would effectively be lost because they would need to fit with a chord. So for instance, with the G7 or some of the simpler chords, if we had something like a C in here, so just a C major, if you played any of the other notes, they would end up becoming one of the chord tones and you lose the ability to improvise, shall we say. So what I'm going to do now is the same kind of idea, but back on the solo track, I'm going to put it onto scales, and then I'm going to play just running up the major scale. So we get the idea, apart from the little slip there, because playing on the keyboard isn't so straightforward. So if we look at that there, we can see that the notes have changed depending on what chord was happening underneath. So sometimes we'll get an A, so we can see we've got a nice example there. So we've got, it was an A sharp here because that fit the chord, and then becomes a B, this part of the chord, etc. So throughout it was generating that. The bottom of this one, it only went to a C sharp because C wouldn't have fitted with that chord, etc. So it's doing all that for you. Now, clearly, if you did something more interesting than just going up and down the scale, you could come up with a quite convincing solo without having to be aware of the harmonic possibilities. Now, last thing on this, very briefly, is if there is a point where you think, I want a different scale at this point, you can soon add it. So we've had automatic scales, it's put those in, but you can just pencil them in much the same way you would a chord. So let's say at this E7 you decided to have a different choice. So not C major, but it's just defaulted to C major. And handily it plays you that. So if you don't know what the scale sounds like, it will do it. And then we will put something more interested in it. So Mixolydian is spelt interestingly there, etc. So that kind of thing you can put in there, and by spending a bit of time with this, you can find yourself able to play things which are way beyond your keyboard skills ability. So say obviously doing it with a proper MIDI keyboard, and spending a bit of time playing around with your ideas, you can come up with something really interesting and following complicated chord progressions with a minimum of effort.